So, how much contingency do you need for your fix and flip project, or even your new construction project, or even just remodeling to rent? Maybe it's going to be long term, short term. What is an appropriate contingency? Is it 1%? Is it 5, 10, 20, 30, more? Correct answer. Ready for this? All of them, because it just depends on what is the scope of work. Let's break this down. If I was buying a property that's more or less turnkey, I will still put in 1%. Why? Because there's always something to do. Always, 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 there's always something to do. And let's be real, in our mind, it's hard to wrap our mind around this idea that a property literally needs nothing. There's always something, right? And maybe if it's not broken, it's something that can be improved. Okay, it's just human nature, and that's okay, because 1% generally is a small amount of money, maybe even less than 1%. But then when we start getting to real projects, we'll start with cosmetic, right? Cosmetic project, I'll usually say at least 10%, because that's pretty normal. A few things are going to get added, switched around, and so forth. But here's the key. As the project scope of work gets bigger, your contingency needs to also get bigger. Okay, so if I'm going from a cosmetic to a full rehab, I'm not going to be at 10%, I might be 20%. If I'm going to a gut, 25% bare minimum. Realistically, on a full gut, I'm going 30, 40%. I've even seen 50%. It actually happened to us because of one contractor mistake. He literally increased our budget by almost 50%. One mistake created a huge headache. It was unbelievable. To this day, it still blows my mind. But fortunately, we recovered, but holy cow. So, as the project scope gets bigger, the contingency needs to get bigger. Okay. As your price point goes up, the size of your contingency needs to go up. Okay. Why? Because more expensive houses have higher standards. Okay. And as a result, so do the contingencies need to be bigger. As the square footage of the property increases, the contingency level also needs to increase. Why? Because if I'm painting a 5,000 square foot house versus a 2,000 square foot house, that's more than double the size, 2.5 times. It is like, holy cow. Like, there's so many more things that could go wrong that need to be addressed, things that come up, caulk this, fix that, tape this, whatever. Okay. Lots of little minor repairs and so forth. And that's just paint. Okay. So as the house gets bigger, the contingency gets bigger. Now, the less you want to manage the contractor, the bigger your contingency is going to have to be. I remember when we were building a bunch of houses, I came across some builders that had overruns, cost overruns, literally under 2%. And I was like, that is amazing that, but how do you get to where your contingency is under 2%? There's two steps. One, you've got to be all over the management of that process or that project, step by step by step. You're effectively doing a punch list at every single step of the way, triple checking everything before you go to the next thing. It adds time to the project, slows it down, but it keeps your costs in line. So there's a trade-off there. Second, you've got to totally be all over the subs to make sure you're cross-checking every quote to make sure you're getting the best deal and the best value for your project, and it happens to be more or less in budget. Okay, which means you're probably ruling out a bunch of things at the same time. So it's very management intensive. So that's why I say, if you want to bring your contingency down, your management level has to go up. So the less you want to manage the day-to-day details and contractors and materials and all the quotes and this and that and the other, then the bigger your contingency is going to need to be. If you want to be more hands off, you need to have more contingency to allow for screw ups that are almost guaranteed to happen. Okay. Because unless you can literally reproduce yourself, it's going to happen. You can have the perfect scope of work, it will still happen. Speaking of scope of work, the more detailed your scope of work, the more you can rein in that contingency level a little bit. Okay. More preparation will create less room for error. But that's, again, going back to how involved you want to be, a lot more work up front. So, this idea about contingency, don't look at your hard money lender spreadsheet. Don't rely on what your favorite investor online says, including me. Don't rely on what the people at the RIA say. You need to really break down and ask for yourself these things that I'm talking about. How involved do you want to be, and adapt accordingly? Okay. I will say at a minimum, plan for 20%. In general, if you don't want to put a lot of effort into the topic, minimum 20%. If it's an old, as the other one I forgot to mention, older houses. The older the house is, the more the contingency needs to be. And once you start getting pre 1960s, and you're not going up 1 or 2%, you're going up 10, 20, 30%. Okay. So age has an impact on that as well. And then one more is the unknown factor. And I don't mean like what's behind the walls. I mean, what are some just lays of the land? Okay, the neighborhood. Are you in flood zones? Is it a busy street? Like just things that are just, it's not a house just sitting in a neighborhood. There's other factors outside of the property, maybe HOA restrictions, okay, maybe permitting related things where even these things can blow up your contingency. So the more exterior factors you may have to contend with, the more your contingency needs to grow. But bare minimum, 20%, bare minimum is what I would say in most cases outside of, you know, plain super easy cosmetics or turnkey stuff. General, as a general rule, 20% bare minimum. And by the way, if you happen to be doing new construction, this does not change. I've new construction, one mistake can cost you thousands as fast as you can blink an eye. So, that is not an exception, especially if you're doing spec or custom construction. If you're building to rent or you're renovating to rent, I should say, the same thing applies. Okay. Don't just assume, well, I'm just going to do a few little deferred maintenance things. They can accelerate quite quickly, I might add. Okay. So the contingency is a critical thing. Understand all these different things I mapped out. Maybe write them down in a list, or you could just email me. I'll send them to you, or download the audio to this video, transcribe it, whatever you want to do. And ask yourself these questions for each project you do, and that'll give you a much better idea of where that contingency needs to land so that it's project appropriate and it's also you appropriate for what your goals are for the job. So with that, please like, share, comment, subscribe. I will see you around.